Bombing of Tokyo, often referred to as a series of firebombing raids, was conducted as part of the air raids on Japan by the United States Army Air Forces during the Pacific campaigns of World War II. The U.S. mounted a small-scale raid on Tokyo in April 1942. Strategic bombing and urban area bombing began in 1944 after the long-range B-29 Superfortress bomber entered service, first deployed from China and thereafter the Mariana Islands. B-29 raids from those islands began on November 17, 1944 and lasted until August 15, 1945, the day Japan capitulated. The Operation Meetinghouse air raid of March 10, 1945 was later estimated to be the single most destructive bombing raid in history. Doolittle Raid. The first raid on Tokyo was the Doolittle Raid of April 18, 1942, when 16 B-25 Mitchells were launched from USS Hornet to attack targets including Yokohama and Tokyo and then fly onto airfields in China. The raid was the retaliation against the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The raid did little damage to Japan's war capability but was a significant propaganda victory for the United States. Launched prematurely, none of the attacking aircraft reached at designated airfields, either crashing or ditching. One aircraft landed in the neutral Soviet Union where the crew was interned, but then smuggled over the border into Iran on May 11, 1943. 2 crews were captured by the Japanese in occupied China and later killed in violation of the 1929 Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War. B-29 raids. The key development for the bombing of Japan was the B-29 Superfortress strategic bomber, which had an operational range of 3,250 nautical miles and was capable of attacking at high altitude above 30,000 feet where enemy defenses were very weak. Almost 90% of the bombs dropped on the home islands of Japan were delivered by this type of bomber. Once Allied ground forces had captured islands sufficiently close to Japan, airfields were built on those islands and B-29s could reach Japan for bombing missions. The initial raids were carried out by the 20th Air Force operating out of mainland China in Operation Matterhorn under 20 Bomber Command, but these could not reach Tokyo. Operations from the Northern Mariana Islands commenced in November 1944 after the XXI Bomber Command was activated there. The high-altitude bombing attacks using general-purpose bombs were observed to be ineffective by USAAF leaders. Changing tactics to increase the damage, Curtis LeMay ordered the bombers to drop incendiary bombs to burn Japan's vulnerable wood and paper buildings. The first such raid was against Kobe on February 4, 1945. Tokyo was hit by incendiaries on February 25, 1945 when 174 B-29s flew a high-altitude raid during daylight hours and destroyed around 643 acres of the snow-covered city, using 453.7 tons of mostly incendiaries with some fragmentation bombs. At this point, LeMay ordered the B-29 bombers to attack at a relatively low altitude of 5,000 to 9,000 AFT and at night, because Japan's anti-aircraft artillery defenses were weakest in this altitude range, and the fighter defenses were ineffective at night. LeMay ordered all defensive guns but the tail gun removed from the B-29 so that the aircraft would be lighter and use less fuel. On the night of March 10, 334 B-29s took off to raid with 279 of them dropping 1,665 tons of bombs on Tokyo. The bombs were mostly the 500-pound E-46 cluster bomb which released 38 napalm-carrying M69 incendiary bomblets at an altitude of 2,000–2,500 AFT. The M69s punched through thin roofing material or landed on the ground. In either case they ignited 3–5 seconds later, throwing out a jet of flaming napalm globs. A lesser number of M47 incendiaries was also dropped. The M47 was a 100-pound gelled gasoline and white phosphorus bomb which ignited upon impact. In the first 2 hours of the raid, 226 of the attacking aircraft unloaded their bombs to overwhelm the city's fire defenses. The first B-29s to arrive dropped bombs in a large X pattern centered in Tokyo's densely populated working-class district near the docks in both Konto and Chuo city wards on the water. Later aircraft simply aimed near this flaming X-14 B-29s were lost. the individual fires caused by the bombs joined to create a general conflagration, which would have been classified as a firestorm but for prevailing winds gusting at 17 to 28 mph. Approximately 15.8 square miles of the city was destroyed and some 100,000 people are estimated to have died. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey later estimated that nearly 88,000 people died in this one raid, 41,000 were injured, and over 1 million residents lost their homes. The Tokyo Fire Department estimated a higher toll, 97,000 killed and 125,000 wounded. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department established a figure of 124,711 casualties including both killed and wounded and 286,358 buildings and homes destroyed. Richard Rhodes, historian, put deaths at over 100,000, injuries at 1 million and homeless residents at 1 million. These casualty and damage figures could be low. Mark Selden wrote in Japan Focus, a figure of roughly 100,000 deaths, provided by Japanese and American authorities, both of whom may have had reasons of their own for minimizing the death toll, seems to me arguably low in light of population density, wind conditions, and survivors' accounts. With an average of 103,000 inhabitants per square mile and peak levels as high as 135,000 per square mile, the highest density of any industrial city in the world, and with firefighting measures ludicrously inadequate to the task, 15.8 square miles of Tokyo were destroyed on a night when fierce winds whipped the flames and walls of fire blocked tens of thousands fleeing for their lives. An estimated 1.5 million people lived in the burned-out areas. In his 1968 book, reprinted in 1990, historian Gabriel Kolko cited a figure of 125,000 deaths. The Operation Meetinghouse firebombing of Tokyo on the night of 9/March 10, 1945 was the single deadliest air raid of World War II. Greater than Dresden, Hiroshima, or Nagasaki as single events. Results: damage to Tokyo's heavy industry was slight until firebombing destroyed much of the light industry that was used as an integral source for small machine parts and time-intensive processes. Firebombing also killed or made homeless many workers who had been taking part in war industry. Over 50% of Tokyo's industry was spread out among residential and commercial neighborhoods. Firebombing cut the whole city's outputs in half. The destruction and damage was especially severe in the eastern areas of the city. The Imperial Palace was surrounded by areas destroyed by firebombing. The main palace itself, home of the Imperial General Headquarters, took heavy damage by fire, even though bombing it was specifically prohibited by USAAF order. Emperor Hirohito's tour of the destroyed areas of Tokyo in March 1945 was the beginning of his personal involvement in the peace process, culminating in Japan's surrender 6 months later. Post-war recovery: after the war, Tokyo struggled to rebuild. In 1945 and 1946, the city received a share of the national reconstruction budget roughly proportional to its amount of bombing damage, but in successive years Tokyo saw its share dwindle. By 1949, Tokyo was given only 10.9% of the budget. At the same time there was runaway inflation devaluing the money as Japan was spending more than it was bringing in from taxes. Occupation authorities such as Joseph Dodge stepped in and drastically cut back on Japanese government rebuilding programs, focusing instead on simply improving roads and transportation. Tokyo did not experience fast economic growth until the 1950s. Memorials: between 1948 and 1951 the ashes of 105,400 people killed in the attacks on Tokyo were interred in Yokohama-cho Park in Sumida Ward. A memorial to the raids was opened in the park in March 2001. After the war, Japanese author Katsumoto Saotome, a survivor of the 10th March 1945 firebombing, helped start a library about the raid in Konto Ward called The Center of the Tokyo Raids and War Damage. The library contains documents and literature about the raid plus survivor accounts collected by Saotome and the Association to Record the Tokyo Air Raid. Post-war Japanese politics: in 2007, Japanese Prime Minister Abe Shinzo apologized in print, acknowledging Japan's guilt in the bombing of Chinese cities and civilians beginning in 1938. He wrote that the Japanese government should have surrendered as soon as losing the war was inevitable, an action that would have prevented Tokyo from being firebombed in March 1945, as well as subsequent bombings of other cities. However, during his second term as Prime Minister, in 2013 Abe's cabinet stated that the raids were incompatible with humanitarianism, which is one of the foundations of international law, while noting that it is difficult to argue that the raids were illegal under the international laws of the time. In 2007, 112 members of the Association for the Bereaved Families of the Victims of the Tokyo air raids brought a class action against the Japanese government, demanding an apology and 1.232 billion yen in compensation. Their suit charged that the Japanese government invited the raid by failing to end the war earlier, and then failed to help the civilian victims of the raids while providing considerable support to former military personnel and their families. The plaintiffs' case was dismissed at the first judgment in December 2009, and their appeal was rejected. The plaintiffs then appealed to the Supreme Court, which rejected their case in May 2013. Partial list of aerial missions against Tokyo. Partial list of B-29 missions against Tokyo. November 24, 1944, 111 B-29s hit an aircraft factory on the rim of the city. November 27, 1944, 81 B-29s hit the dock and urban area and 13 targets of opportunity. 29 November 30, 1944, 2 incendiary raids on industrial areas, burning 2,773 structures. February 19, 1945, 119 B-29s hit port and urban area. February 24, 1945, 229 B-29s plus over 1,600 carrier-based planes. February 25, 1945, 174 B-29s dropping incendiaries destroy 28,000 buildings. March 4, 1945, 159 B-29s hit urban area. March 9, 1945, 334 B-29s dropping incendiaries destroy 267,000 buildings. 25% of city killing some 100,000. April 2, 1945, 100 B-29s bomb the Nakajima aircraft factory. April 3, 1945, 68 B-29s bomb the Kwazumi aircraft factory and urban areas in Tokyo. April 13, 1945, 327 B-29s bomb the Arsenal area. July 20, 1945, 1 B-29 drops a pumpkin bomb through overcast aiming at but missing the Imperial Palace. August 8, 1945, 60 B-29s bomb the aircraft factory and Arsenal. August 10, 1945, 70 B-29s bomb the Arsenal complex. Partial list of other aerial missions against Tokyo, 16 February 17, 1945, carrier-based aircraft, including dive bombers, escorted by Hellcat fighters attacked Tokyo. Over 2 days, over 1,500 American planes and hundreds of Japanese planes were in the air. By the end of February 17, more than 500 Japanese planes, both on the ground and in the air, had been lost, and Japan's aircraft works had been badly hit. The Americans lost 80 planes. August 18, 1945, last U.S. air combat casualty of World War II occurs during Mission 230A8, when 2 consolidated B-32 Dominators of the 386th Bomb Squadron, 312th Bomb Group, launch from Yontan Airfield, Okinawa, for a photo reconnaissance run over Tokyo, Japan. Both bombers are attacked by several Japanese fighters of both the 302nd Naval Air Group at Atsugi and the Yokosuka Air Group that make 10 gunnery passes. Japanese aces Saddam Komaki and Saburo Sakai are part of this attack. B-32 piloted by First Lieutenant John R. Anderson, is hit at 20,000 feet, cannon fire knocks out No. 2 engine, and 3 crew were injured, including Sergeant Anthony J. Martian, 19, of the 20th Reconnaissance Squadron, who takes 20 hit to the chest, dying 30 minutes later. Tail gunner Sergeant John Houston destroys 1 attacker. Lead bomber, Consolidated B-32-20 CF Dominator, 42 to 108,532, Hobo Queen II, piloted by First Lieutenant James Klein, is not seriously damaged but second consolidated B-32-35 CF Dominator, 42 to 108,578, loses engine, has upper turret knocked out of action, and loses partial rudder control. Both bombers land at Yontlan Airfield just past 1800 hours after surviving the last air combat of the Pacific War. The following day, propellers are removed from Japanese aircraft as part of surrender agreement. Martian is buried on Okinawa on August 19, his body being returned to his Pottstown, Pennsylvania home on March 18, 1949. He is interred in St. Aloysius Old Cemetery with full military honors. Hobo Queen II is dismantled at Yontlan Airfield following a September 9 nozzle gear collapse and damage during lifting. B-32, 42 to 108,578, will be scrapped at Kingman, Arizona after the war. References. Further reading, Caden, Martin. A Torch to the Enemy, The Fire Raid on Tokyo. Ballantine Books. ISBN A0-553-29926-3. D767.25T6C35. Coffey, Thomas M. Iron Eagle, The Turbulent Life of General Curtis LeMay. Random House Value Publishing. ISBN A0-517-55188-8. Crane, Conrad C. The Cigar That Brought the Fire Wind, Curtis LeMay and the Strategic Bombing of Japan. JGSDF US. Army Military History Exchange. Asin B0006 PGEIQA, Frank, Richard B. Downfall, The End of the Imperial Japanese Empire. Penguin. ISBN A0-14-100146-1. Grayling, A.C. Among the Dead Cities, The History and Moral Legacy of the WWII Bombing of Civilians in Germany and Japan. New York, Walker Publishing Company Incorporated. ISBN A0-8027-1565-6. Greer, Ron. Fire from the Sky, A Diary Over Japan. Jacksonville, Arkansas, USA. Greer Publishing. ISBN A0-9768712-0-3. Guillen, Robert. I Saw Tokyo Burning, An Eyewitness Narrative from Pearl Harbor to Hiroshima. Jove Pubns. ISBN A0-86721-223-3. Hoyt, Edwin P. Inferno, The Fire Bombing of Japan, March 9 – August 15, 1945. Madison Books. ISBN A1-56833-149-5. Jablonski, Edward. Air War Against Japan. Air War Outraged Skies Wings of Fire. An Illustrated History of Air Power in the Second World War. Doubleday. Asin B000NGPMSQR, Caracas, Carey. Place, Public Memory and the Tokyo Air Raids. The Geographical Review 100. Lee May, Curtis E. Bill Yen. Superfortress, The Story of the B-29 and American Air Power. McGraw-Hill Companies. ISBN A0-07-037164-4. McGowan, Tom. Air Raid. The Bombing Campaign. Brookfield, Connecticut, USA. 21st Century Books. ISBN A0-7613-1810-0. Shannon, Donald H. United States Air Strategy and Doctrine is employed in the strategic bombing of Japan. U.S. Air University, Air War College. Asin B0006WCQ86. Smith, Jim. Malcolm McConnell. The Last Mission, The Secret History of World War II's Final Battle. Broadway. ISBN A0-7679-0778-7. Tillman, Barrett. Whirlwind, The Air War Against Japan, 1942–1945. Simon & Schuster. ISBN A978-1-4165-8440-7. Irrell, Kenneth P. Blankets of Fire. Smithsonian. ISBN A1-56098-871-1. External links: 67 Japanese cities firebombed in World War II. Army Air Forces in World War II. The Center of the Tokyo Raid and War Damages / Introduction. Barrell, Tony. Tokyo's Burning. ABC Online. Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Retrieved November 3, 2006. A transcript of a radio documentary commentary on the Tokyo firebombing with excerpts from interviews with participants and witnesses. Craven, Wesley Frank. James Lee Cate. Vol. V. The Pacific, Matterhorn to Nagasaki, June 1944 to August 1945. The Army Air Forces in World War II. U.S. Office of Air Force History. Retrieved December 12, 2006. Hansel, J.R., Hayward S. The Strategic Air War Against Germany and Japan, a Memoir. Project Warrior Studies. U.S. Office of Air Force History. Retrieved December 12, 2006. A.